All right, we got cabin fever in full effect. My goodness, Texans Twitter knows how to, the official Texans Twitter. I'm not even talking about the common folk Texans Twitter. Texans Twitter sure does know how to make folks uneasy. What does it mean? We'll try to get to the bottom of it in another edition of The Locker Room, the number one source for Texans daily digital content. Let's go.
Yeah, it's The Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, Locker Room. Yeah, we in the Locker Room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the pulse of the city too. Landlocked. Got the game in the headlock. Localize every time. Can't stop. Won't stop. Yeah, we top two.
All right.
We not too plugged in.
So what in the hell were the Texans doing with the tweet that they sent out today? What were they doing with the tweet that they sent out today? By the way, Sumro L says that the intro song sucks. You're booted, sir. You're booted, sir. You're gone. Blocked. Peace out, sir. Don't ever diss Figgy Fig like that. It's a hell of an intro song. You suck. So peace out to you. Just kind of in a little bit of a mood today. Woke up this morning, was checking out the what was going on with the Texans. Got through doing a video. And then I woke up and I'll be damned. Texans send out a tweet that was very, very strange, to say the very least. I don't know what they were trying to do. There's a lot of conspiracy theories, but the Houston Texans official Twitter, they've been on fire since then. If you woke up and you scrolled through Twitter, this was what you saw on the on the Texans Twitter. You saw this lovely message right here. Failure is not an option. It's a necessity. Every misstep is a lesson learned. Every setback, a chance to grow stronger. Embrace the struggle and become unstoppable. Okay. Are we talking about the last 2 years? Are we setting people up for failure? There's also a conspiracy theory that I thought was interesting, that it's kind of the same font as the tattoo that Will Levis has on his right bicep. And it's kind of like the same type of dialogue that is on that bicep. So maybe the Will Levis bicep came into play, and the Will Levis odds are really high right now. So you have Will Levis as the favorite to be number 2, and you basically just set everyone off with all this. Let's bring in Cole Thompson. Cole Thompson joins the show. Cole, what did you make of the tweet? Do you have any conspiracy theories? What did you make of that?
I mean, Will Levis has a tattoo like right in the same spot that I have a tattoo. So it's like, I mean, that's cool, I guess. You're gonna fail is the way it felt like. It felt like, hey, expect the worst, hope for the best. Whatever happens. We're gonna do what we have to do to make sure that we get the right players involved and get over it. Like, I feel like that's kind of the way that it is right now. So I look at the situation. I think that Houston is trying to pay complete and total dividends of what they're trying to do. They're trying to throw everyone off the beaten trail. You can ask anybody in the building. They don't have the right answer. You can ask anybody at the national level. They don't have the right answer. Nobody has any idea what's really going on. And then they drop a tweet probably about an hour before this where they're doing draft party stuff. And there's a little anonymous link that shows 4 players sitting waiting in the wings. Is it one of the 4? And it's not Will Levis. It's not guys like Anthony Richardson. It's guys just like Tyree Wilson, who's been mentioned, and Will Anderson and Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. So you're like, okay, well, you kind of are off of CJ Stroud. Why is he in your tweet? Why is he there? Why are you throwing him in the mix? So I honestly think that they're just having fun with it at this point. They know what they're doing at pick number 2. If they don't know what they're doing at pick number 2, it's because if they're waiting for someone to call to go ahead and give them an offer they can't refuse to where they can move down, they're just having fun at this point because at the end of the day, the only person that truly knows what's going on is the man who is going to have to decide how he wants to play his third draft. And this is going to be a very, very, very telling draft, I think, for the future of the organization.
Yeah, it's really just kind of an uncertain time right now. You have the Levis odds, you have the tweet, you have the uncertainty. The only certainty seems to be that Bryce Young is going to go number 1, and then you send out that tweet. We'll get into your mock draft in a sec, but have you sold yourself on Will Levis being sold as the face of the franchise for the Texans?
Did when he was playing last year in a really good offense underneath Liam Cohen, or in 2021. Didn't buy into him last year. Not buying into him now. Doesn't mean he can't be a good quarterback. I want this to be abundantly clear. If he does come to Houston, there is upside for a guy like him. I think that his ceiling is probably somewhere in between a mix of a Kirk Cousins and a Matthew Stafford. I think his floor is a Carson Wentz, and I think that kind of the middle ground is a Ryan Tannehill. That's what you're getting. He has mobility. He does have
Carson Wentz. Which Carson?
Wentz? Washington Commanders Carson Wentz.
Okay.
Not 2017. Not almost
okay.
MVP. No.
Okay.
It's probably Commanders Carson Wentz. His footwork, if you go back and you watch, especially last year when they got rid of Liam Cohen because he went back to the NFL, his feet just stick out. They immediately allude to inaccurate throws, off-ball kind of plays. There's not a lot to like about where his decision-making goes, but he has a good arm. He has physical toughness as all hell. I mean, I'll give the kid credit. The one thing I will say about a guy like Will Levis, he is physically as talented and as physically tough as anybody out there. He took a plethora of hits last year, and he just got back up and smiled in the face of adversity. He puts mayo in his coffee, so he automatically knows what it's like to have pain in his stomach throughout, the entire day. So that's always good. He eats banana pills, so, that's definitely like he's getting a little bit of that potassium in him, so he's got that dog. But I think that what you're getting is probably a lesser version of Kirk Cousins, maybe a slightly upgraded version of the best Ryan Tannehill. And that doesn't mean it can't work in this offense, but it does mean that there are going to be some limitations to his game. I just don't see him at 2. Everyone that I've spoken to has said, I don't know where he fits at 2. Ultimately, I think what this really is that you're saying, listen, if we're going to have the odds at 2, maybe it's because we want Indianapolis to move up to go get their guy. And that could be their guy that they really want.
James Cook says no one knows what is going on because the Texans have been tight-lipped. Saying Levis is the pick is wrong. Saying anyone is wrong at this point. No one knows. That's a fact. That's the beauty of draft. Yeah. That's, I don't know. You don't know. Rappaport doesn't know. Schefter doesn't know that. Like, that's the beauty of draft talk. That's just something that you just kind of embrace. It's a different type of dialogue than what we get over the course of a year, and it's unpredictable. There's no exact science to it. There's a lot of variables, and anything can happen and anything can change. So it's really not serious. Like that, we're not predicting a hurricane. We're not predicting a freaking tornado. We're not predicting anything. You're sprinkling in your opinions with a little bit of what you hear, and you're talking about the uncertainty and all that stuff. So it's not that serious. Like
it's not the last drive of Thanksgiving where, CBS Sports decides to go ahead and cut off the game of Detroit versus Buffalo. Yeah. It's not that serious. We're not doing that.
Yeah. And I mean, like if you're bothered by it and you're stiffer than a wedding dong, you don't need to be on Twitter during the whole draft process. It's just not the place for you. Just get off, chill. I don't know, go listen to some NPR sports or something like that, and maybe go get you a 1970s like box score. Like go get you a Jack Buck 1970s box score. But this is the season of speculation. This is the season of nobody knows. This is a season of anybody in the comments. Their opinions as valuable as our opinion, and the opinions are as valuable and as unknown as Rappaport. It's a fun time to be around. Jerome says, if we get Anderson at 2 and JSN at 12, what grade are you giving the first round? Cole's probably giving it an A+ because that was what he had in his mock draft. So
I have one difference, but besides that, those are my first 2 picks. So no chance of hiding back on that one. So all right, we can just get into it. I personally think that the Texans are going to trade the pick. I really do. I think that as of right now, if they can get the right offer in place, they would trade the pick today. I wholeheartedly believe that because of you have to realize in a very quarterback heavy class where there is talent galore, where there is the ability to change your culture for a franchise, and you have the capability of adding in more draft picks. And what we know about Nick Casario is that he is a guy that is wheeling and dealing. He is always moving. The engine is never sleeping. He wants to have as much draft capital to be able to control the board in his favor. So I think right now the two teams you have to keep a close eye on, and I reached out to multiple people. Las Vegas at 7 is probably the biggest one. I have heard multiple times that even though because of you're hearing now, oh, they're not going to go ahead and take a quarterback. They're just going to stay there at 7 and draft a corner. Okay, well, they're doing that because they want to drive down the asking price. They want to see if someone else is going to move up. If they're going to go down, I think Tyree Wilson is the pick at number 7. I also think that right now Tennessee is the wild card to move up to pick number 3. And the best way to go ahead and subtract a player from a personnel member of an opposing team is by adding him to your roster. And I've heard they like Will Levis. I've heard they like CJ Stroud. I ultimately think at this point what you're going to see is probably Indianapolis trying to get a deal done. They want to move up. They want to go get their quarterback of the future. So they give you a couple draft capital. They gave you number 4. They give you pick number 35. They give you pick number 79, which came in the deal in the Carson Wentz process. They give you an extra second-round pick in 2024, and they give you a 5th-round pick. So you get all this draft capital, and you have to because of its in-division trades. So it's an in-division trade, so you can ask for what you want. You go ahead and you move back to pick number 4. You allow CJ Stroud to come off the board. So it's no longer your fault. Whatever happens, that's it. It's done. You allow, and I had in my mock draft that's actually releasing tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow afternoon. I had in my mock draft Tennessee trading up. I think Tennessee is going after either Will Levis or Hendon Hooker. Will Levis or CJ Stroud. I think wholeheartedly they're moving off of a Malik Willis deal. It's a brand new guy in the likes of Rand Carthon running this team. They're going to do whatever they can to go get their future quarterback. And then you take Will Anderson at pick number 4. And the reason why you take Will Anderson at pick number 4, and the problem that people seem to forget all the time about we need a quarterback, you are not a team that's good enough to pass on premier talent. You are not a team that's built right now to not have great talent on your roster. And when you look at this time period, at this moment, when you see the value of getting a premier run defender, and I think both Tyree Wilson and Will Anderson are phenomenal run defenders, when you have the ability to be able to get a difference maker on your defensive line, especially when last year you had Father Time as your absolute number 1 pass rusher in Jerry Hughes going into a contract year, Jonathan Gennard going into a contract year. You have no real solid depth behind it, and you need to be able to get that fortified defensive lineman up front. When you look right now at the way that DeMeco Ryans built that defense, and underneath John Lynch, they had really solid players that were day 2 and day 3 picks. That defensive line was all first-round talent. That defensive line was all predicated on day 1 material. When you look at what a guy like Will Anderson can do, explosive first step, great violent hands, his ability to mismatch offensive linemen, bulldoze over people like it's no one's business. He's phenomenal when it comes to run support. He does a great job of working in the backfield and getting hands on a quarterback. All this functionality, you look at what you get on the table for a Will Anderson. If you're able to move back, if you're able to find a way to get some draft capital to control your board, and you take Will Anderson, I call that a massive win.
Now, Billy the Kid says, why would the Colts move up when they know the Texans aren't taking Stroud? Here was my thing. And they might like Levis. And I said this too. I actually did a video about this before I even saw your mock draft, which is available now in the channel. Subscribe, by the way, number 1 source for Texans daily digital content is the Locker Room, because Arizona's in front of them. So even when you had a situation like in 2017 where San Francisco traded back with Chicago and got a 3rd-round pick, Colts right now are at the mercy of the Texans and Arizona, who both appear to be open for business. Texans, if they didn't want to take a quarterback, they would want an edge guy. The Colts would want a quarterback. So that's why the trade would make sense, because you're not necessarily just trying to call a bluff at that point. You're trying to avoid getting hopped over by someone that trades for Arizona, who is 100% open for business right now. So that's the whole point of why Indianapolis would do that and why it might make sense. And from a Texans standpoint, and if you want to trade back far, I see some people talking about the Vikings and all that. That's my kind of party too. But I'm just talking about if they're in love with their edge guy and they need to have Wilson or they need to have Will Anderson, trading with Indianapolis solidifies that. Furthermore, you're trading a quarterback that you don't believe. You're giving a quarterback to someone in your division that you don't believe in. So if you really trust your evaluation, you don't think that guy's worth the number 2 overall pick. I mean, it's not like you're trading him to Deshaun Watson when Deshaun Watson decides he wants to trade. You're trading a quarterback that you don't think is worthy of the number 2 pick. You're trading him to someone in your division.
It's not only that. The other thing is that you have to keep in mind that if you don't believe in this guy's ability to transcend your roster, let another team in your division make that mistake if you feel like it is a mistake. Because at the end of the day, they're going to be investing 3-4 years down the line of this player that you have absolutely no thought process of being able to elevate your team at a position of value. Let him take that risk. Because if you fail, but yet you trade down, at least you can say, we didn't pass on a guy. We allowed someone else to move up. We garnered more draft capital. We allowed ourselves to put our place in a better situation. We found the likes of where we are going to be able to improve as a team. We did not waste a pick here. What we did was we moved down. We got more draft capital. We put ourselves in a better situation to control the board in the narrative in our favor. And I saw someone in the comments say, well, he reminds me of Jadeveon Clowney. Guys, this was the worst run defense last year. They were leading the NFL in missed tackles at the defensive line. This is a team that needs to get better when you go and fix your run defense. You have to. You cannot be a roster in a division that features Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, Jonathan Taylor. Allow these guys to go work after yards and get easy contact up the middle of the field. So Will Anderson, he's a great pass rusher and a run defender. Tyree Wilson is somebody who I look at, and I think that he has more value as a run defender. He's like a Venus flytrap, literally just stands there and things just fly into his face. Like he's just that good at finding the run. He can get better as a pass rusher. But one of those two is probably the pick that you're going to have to make. And you can't take a pass rusher at 2 because if you do, what you're doing is you're allowing a team that maybe ends up really liking a quarterback. And if the quarterback hits, you just pass on him. So if you trade down, you allow someone else to take that risk, and you're at no fault there.
Marcus asks, if the Texans pass on Stroud and he becomes a star, should we stay with Casario? No way. The Lombardi claim was all smoke. My thing is this. I think we got to realize that the reason that we're having these conversations is because of partly Casario's doing. So this is the D'Amico inherited this situation where the number 2 pick is there. I don't know if there's any consequences for Casario. It might just be a wipe the slate clean. But obviously, if they pass on a quarterback and the quarterback ends up being really good, there's going to be some regret. But on the other hand, if D'Amico Ryans is a really good coach, and if the staff is able to coach up guys and they're able to develop guys in other ways, even in San Francisco, when they passed on Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes and really drafted Solomon Thomas, which ended up being a pretty bad pick, they were able to overcome it because of other things, because of other factors, because of other ways to win games. And furthermore, same thing with Robert Saleh. If you look at Robert Saleh, they whiffed on a quarterback at 2, and they were still able to be in position to where they were a quarterback away. So, yeah, obviously we're always going to talk about CJ Stroud, Will Levis. If the Texans pass on him, Anthony Richardson, say, wow, what could have been. But if you're coaching guys up and you're developing players and you're figuring stuff out, I mean, you're going to miss on some draft picks every once in a while. So I don't think that there's going to be like a situation where, that they look back and say, you know what, you're gone, Casario. I don't think that's going to happen. The
biggest thing is that, in my opinion, Casario, you'll know, I think, by midseason what the situation is with Casario. If the picks from 2021 are not hitting, and the picks from 2022 are regressing, and the picks from 2023 aren't making the right strides, you do all that, then yeah, the biggest thing about Nick Casario was he was a draft guy when he was coming out of New England. He loved the draft. He was always a guy that was scheming on day 3. The way that they added in talent because of that was because of him. I mean, that was part of the selling point for Nick Casario. So if that's the case, then yeah, you see him go out there. But because if he passes on a quarterback and another team hits, like if you find the quarterback that works best for your system, whatever round you get him in, 3rd, 5th, 7th, doesn't matter. Whatever round you get him in, If your quarterback works for your system and you allow another team to go take a quarterback and you get more draft capital, you're going to get a win in this one, in my opinion, if you're Nick Casario.
The thing, like if I was trying to sell this, and I did the sell me this pick today, and I had a maybe a long shot ish draft where they got Will Anderson and they got Bijan Robinson at 12. And I know how polarizing the running back thing is. But if I were trying to sell that and I were DeMeco Ryans, I would simply go up there and say, look, we've been through the quarterback situation in San Francisco. I've seen every scenario that you can see when it comes to a quarterback. We've passed on some that we regret. We've drafted guys and maybe it hasn't worked out. We had Mr. Irrelevant go 5-0 for us, and we went to an NFC championship game. But last year, our two best players were, one was a defensive lineman and the other one was a running back. Best player was Nick Bosa, defensive player of the year, and Christian McCaffrey. We lost one game that he started in. And trading for Christian McCaffrey was a huge, huge thing for us. And we think we can build a football team and be competitive right now and figure out the quarterback situation a little bit later on. That's how I would sell it. Now, I don't think they're going to – I don't think Bijan will even be there at 12. But if that happened, that's how I would sell it. And I think that's kind of – whether it's Bijan or not, I think that's kind of the way that DeMeco needs to sell it. But I do think, and I get a kick out of this, I'm going to talk to John McClain tomorrow at 11. Like this whole, like, we got to draft a quarterback. My thing is, like, why? Like, for what? Like, are people going to revolt? Like, is there not going to be butts in seats? Like, the stadium hasn't been empty because they haven't had a quarterback. It's been because there have been trust issues. And you don't really trust what's going on with this team, and the team has sucked. So, like this notion that they got to have a quarterback or else there's going to be like some sort of like issue. We're used to not having a quarterback here. We're really not used to having a coach that we can 100% trust. It hasn't really happened since Kubiak. So if DeMeco Ryans can sell this, and I think he's got to be the one to sell it, I think people can buy in no matter what.
My biggest thing is that, and my big board's coming out tomorrow, he's my number 2 player. He's the most complete offensive player in this year's draft. Hands down. No questions asked. The way to utilize him is a lot like Edgerrin James when he was working opposite of Peyton Manning back in Indianapolis in the early 2000s. That is how you utilize a guy like Bijan Robinson. And I hate this notion he's a running back. No, he is a weapon. The year before, you mentioned this. So you bring up how Christian McCaffrey was a dynamic playmaker for San Francisco this past season. He was. The year before that, Deebo Samuel was the exact same way. Deebo Samuel did everything. He was a slot back. He was a wing back. He played running back. He took reps in the slot. He was great after the catch. He was good in short yardage situations. You could utilize him in the red zone. This was what Deebo Samuel did. He's a weapon. Bijan Robinson averaged 13.5 yards per catch. He had over 35 receptions per season. Not to mention, he also is a phenomenal open field. He's phenomenal when he gets in the open field. I'm not taking him at 12. I can't do that because if you need help at wide receiver, but if there was a reason to go ahead and take a running back, it's because if this is a guy that isn't a running back. He is a dynamic weapon 10 times over. You can utilize him in pass pro. You can utilize him in the open field. His vision is 3 steps ahead of every single player on that field. Offensively, defensively. He is seeing holes that are not even close to being open yet. That is what a guy like Bijan Robinson does. I don't think you take him because if you need to be able to get a really good wide receiver to fortify whoever is your quarterback, but I do like a guy like Bijan Robinson. And the reason why, if you were to say to DeMeco Ryans, hey, we can go ahead and sell this, is because if I know what we're going to get out of this, I could see it. I don't think that they do that. Personally, in my mock, I have him staying still at number 12. He fell. You take the best wide receiver available, and that's Jack Spinton-Njigba. You immediately take Jack Spinton-Njigba. I think that, and again,
you ain't hurt me there.
What was the thing is that we can talk about this all the time. Oh, well, he's a slot receiver. Well, yeah, because of Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson played on the outside. This past year, he played 43 reps. We have no idea if he would have transpired and played on the outside this past year, if he was fully healthy. The hamstring injury was bothersome. But the thing that I look at, and it's an elite trait that people aren't paying attention to. Everyone looks at the 40. Everyone looks at the exact 40-yard dash. His 20-yard split was the fastest among wide receivers. He works in short yardage situations and is able to change direction at the drop of a pin so quickly. He's so dynamic in those little areas. That will help him win whether he has to play inside or outside. He's a premier route runner. When you go work with Brian Hartline at Ohio State, I got word from somebody who was up there for the last what was it, the spring game this past year. They told me that when Brian Hartline moved to offensive coordinator, he still spends half of his time working on the little tidbits about route running with the likes of wide receiver play. So he is still looking at the fundamentals of the position. There's been multiple scouts who have told me if you want to work in the NFL for a decade plus, you have to be good at the little fundamentals. And that is exactly what Jack Smith-Njigba does. He doesn't drop a lot of balls. He doesn't he doesn't have premier speed, but he does have great short yardage burst. He can win at the point of an attack. He's got good vertical presence. He's got a little bit of that pop in the open field. He can miss players in the open field. There's a lot of positivity with him. And you got to remember that when you looked last year, what Nick Casario wanted in John Mechie, pristine route running. What does a guy like Jack Smith-Njigba do? Pristine route running.
On another level, though, than Mechie.
On it. And what's crazy is
on a much higher level. Let's not get that twisted.
But what's crazy is that when you look last year, John Mechie was one of the best route runners in the class, and he doesn't even hold a candle to what Jack Smith-Njigba can do. That's the crazy part.
Yeah, it's not close. The possibility of the Texans trading with the Raiders, like if that did happen and they went to 7, I would be okay with taking Bijan at that point. I know it sounds crazy. I just know you're talking about Atlanta doing it at 8, Philly. I would be okay if you're getting your second best player, a lot of people's first best player in the draft, and you've already said we're not taking a quarterback at that point. I mean, all bets are off. Just get as many ballers as you can, and then even if you get Smith-Njigba at 12, and then we're just building this roster to where whoever the quarterback is has a favorable situation, I would almost be willing to do it at that point. That's just kind of where I'm at. That's just kind of my adjustment as to where we're at now. Defense, you still need your edge guy. If you're trading back to 7, you're not getting any of these defensive guys. So that's the problem with trading that deep. Like how committed are they to getting one of these edge guys, or do they just decide to go with the quarterback? But if they are, that's the thing that confuses me.
You got to think, man, because of just think about it for a second. So say Las Vegas moves up to number 2. Arizona's moving out. So that's another team that's taking a quarterback. So 1, 2, 3, 4 off the board immediately. I don't care if it's Anthony Richardson, if it's Will Levis at 4. That's 4 off the board. You basically are guaranteed 1 of 3 players defensively. Tyree Wilson, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter. I think we all can agree Jalen Carter's not on the board. I think at this point, because of everything that's going on, brand new regime, brand new coaching staff, they're not going to take Jalen Carter. This is not the year to go ahead and take that risk. But I think that right now the big selling point is what does a team like Detroit do at pick number 6? Because if Will Anderson is available, I'd say pick number 7. That's a slam dunk steal. It's an absolute home run steal. You run to that podium just by value alone. At the same time, if, say, Seattle took Jalen Carter, you're guaranteed Tyree Wilson or Will Anderson to pick number 7. So I look at it that way, and I just think of the value. You need to get a better defensive lineman. If you aren't in love with great play outside of that defensive lineman, outside of the top 2, you got to go ahead and get your guy at pick number 7. You also need to find a way to focalize what you want to do for the foreseeable future. I brought up the idea of getting a cornerback at some point in this year's draft. I think that it's important to get a cornerback because you have Desmond King going into a contract year. You have Tavierre Thomas going into a contract year. Steven Nelson going into a contract year. 2 of those guys are going to be over 30 in the next 2 years. So you got to get better on the outside. The best way to go ahead and fortify your pass rush, if you don't like any of the pass rushers, is take away receivers deep downfield. So I just feel like if you don't have any of those players available, then I would listen to where you're coming from on the likes of what you have with Bijan Robinson. But if one of those 2 is available, whether it be Tyree Wilson or whether it be Will Anderson, and you want to take them at 2, and you can move all the way down to 7 and get an extra first-round pick in next year's draft. You can get an extra third-round pick and an extra second-round pick and an extra fourth-round pick in next year's draft. And one of them's available, and you want them at 2 and they're available at 7, I just think that that's the move.
Here's the other thing that's kind of a problem for the Texans when it comes to potentially not taking a quarterback and waiting next year. And it's kind of the snowball effect. I touched on it on the show. By the way, Locker Room, #1 source for Texans daily digital content. Subscribe, like, all that. Follow Cole at Mr. Cole Thompson. Keep the subscribes, likes, all that coming. There's kind of like a never-ending situation now where Texans fans are in a weird spot where typically if you don't get a quarterback, it's very easy to root for him and say, I hope this guy sucks. I hope he has a crappy year, and I hope Bryce Young sucks and everything is awful for them. But with Chicago having the pick now, you're in a weird spot with the Chicago Bears because the Chicago Bears now have more ammo than you heading into next year.
Yeah.
So they get to evaluate Justin Fields, and you basically find yourself hoping that in a crazy way, Bryce Young is good and the Panthers win more games than you, and Justin Fields is good so that Chicago is not in better position and they already have more ammo to get their quarterback. And what makes it even worse is it goes even further because if Justin Fields thrives, and let's say Chicago, is looking at Justin Fields as like in like a Jalen Hurts type category or something.
Say they're an 8-win team next year.
They're
Just
in the
8 wins.
And let's say Carolina doesn't do well and Carolina has a worse record than the Texans, then they're in the exact same situation that they were this year where they can screw you again. So like you go back to not having this number one pick and you don't get Bryce Young. So you don't get your top quarterback. Chicago, who's already like shown that they're pretty good at dealing, they have more ammo than you. If Bryce Young, you naturally as a fan want the quarterback you don't get to not do well, but if he doesn't do well, then that pick goes to Chicago. And then you would say, well, hopefully Justin Fields does well so Chicago doesn't need a quarterback. But the reality is if Chicago doesn't need a quarterback, they're going to do to you this year what they're going to do to you next year what they did this year if they have a worse record than you or they have a pick before you, and they're going to screw you over and trade back, or they're going to be in the market for a quarterback. So it's kind of, it's you move on and you evaluate the draft and you talk about what's going to happen in the future. But the snowball effect of the whole thing is it's ongoing. It's ongoing, and it's really confusing, and it's a real big dilemma this next year because in a strange way, you got to root for Bryce.
Well, it's not only that. The problem is that you need not only Bryce to do well, but you need Justin Fields to do well because you need both of them to be out of play to when you're on the board. You also have to hope that a team like Arizona, which in my opinion is going to be riddled not just with injuries, but lack of production with Jonathan Gannon leading the charge, you have to hope that they still really love what they've seen just based off of personality and the way that he's connected with the offense coordinator and Kyler Murray. Because the one thing that is going to happen is that they're picking number 1 and you're picking number 2 or worse, number 3. You're right back in the same conversation where they're moving Kyler Murray. They're not going to take Caleb Williams or Drake May or whoever the hell breaks out next year. I think Houston still takes a quarterback in the first round. I do. I think that, unfortunately, it is what it is. I'll do my best to try and sell it. If Peter King is talking about Hendon Hooker being available, I think that Hendon Hooker is going to be a quarterback that's taken in the first round. And I think Houston trades back in to go get him. And
Really?
the reason is because of you need to be able to have that 5th-year option. That's the only reason why you're trying to do that. And the other thing is that if you're not controlling the board at pick number 32, you can't expect him to be there because some team may want to trade up to go ahead and get him at 32 with the Pittsburgh Steelers to take you out of the conversation altogether. So I think that when you look right now, a trade is somewhere in like that 27 to 29 range, somewhere with maybe Buffalo, maybe with Cincinnati. You give up 33. If you trade down from pick number 2, you get the likes of probably an extra second-round pick, so you're still good with the second-round pick. You bring in Hendon Hooker. Here's the thing. Hendon Hooker, the offense that you played in underneath Josh Heupel, will never transpire to the NFL. It won't. It absolutely will not do that. It's basically a go-go Looney Tunes style offense. It's like seeing Wile E. Coyote paint that little black stripe and it looks like a tunnel on the rock, and you're seeing Roadrunner run through, and then when the NFL goes there, they hit the wall. Like, that's what it is. But mechanically, he is one of the better quarterbacks in this year's draft. Mechanically, he will be able to work immediately in a Bobby Slowick offense. He does have great arm strength. He does have good accuracy. His touchdown to interception ratio was valuable for a reason. He does have really good ability to read the field downfield and decide what you're looking at in terms of ball placement. He's got that. And I do think that he will have enough traits when it comes to the upper body that you will see him end up actually being a pretty substantial quarterback. My comp is he's a mix of a Jared Goff and a Geno Smith. That's not good enough for me to take a top 12.
Pretty generous to me.
That's not good enough for me to take a top 12. That's good enough for me to say, if I need to go ahead and take that risk, if I'm Nick Casario, because if I don't think right now, I will believe I'll be here next year if I don't take a quarterback round 1. That's the way I look at it. The thing that I worry about is
I don't think Nick Casario should be able to do like survival tactics.
I don't think he should either. But
I don't think that's like. And I don't think drafting Hendon Hooker is like going to save your gig if you're worried about it.
But I do think that if Bobby Slowick thinks that he can work with Hendon Hooker in a similar way that you got great play from Brock Purdy, then that's what you do. And I do think that you have to go up into the first round to get him. It's a quarterback.
I'm just not.
Quarterbacks are always. Oh, I know. Trust me, I get it.
I'm just not a fan of that. I think that's reaching. Like, I think if you're going to reach, you might as and honestly, I think there's another possibility that I want to get to at the quarterback position too, but I just think that's reaching. I think that's overcoming not taking a quarterback by reaching for Hooker. I don't think Hooker goes first round.
I do. I based off everyone that I've spoken to, based off conversations that I've had, they don't feel like that Hooker's going to be available at the top end of round 2. So someone's going to have to trade up to go get him.
I'm interested to see how that goes. There's another slippage I want to talk about in a sec. Chris says, I guess he's talking about Bijan and Jackson Smith and Jig, but you don't take slot wide receivers and running backs at 12. I don't agree with that. Like, I know like the examples are, there's always like selective examples, like Saquon Barkley at 2, like as bad as people say that is, he's about to be on his second deal or franchise tag or whatever.
He's on the franchise tag. Yeah.
He's still their best player. Like, he's still their best player. And there's a lot of guys who were drafted. And I think Peter, you mentioned Peter King, and he actually did the research. I think 4 years ago, the 2 previous draft classes, I think the second contract rate was like 35%. And then in the last 2, it's been about 50%, like less than 50%. So like this notion that you don't draft guys for their second contracts, like very, very few guys get second contracts. Furthermore, if you're calling Jackson Smith and Jigba just a slot receiver, I think you're making the same mistake people made about Justin Jefferson last year. Justin Jefferson lined up in the slot, or 2-3 years ago, whatever.
3 years ago,
They lined up in the slot the same amount of times and for the same reason. So if you're just calling him a slot receiver, that's how you end up having a stud fall down to where Justin
22.
Jefferson fell, where he's the fifth receiver taken.
It's not even that. It's that you need wide receiver help. That's number 1. And there's people out there who are saying, "Oh, Jordan Addison," because Jordan Addison played on the outside. Jordan Addison, when he was at Pitt, was a primary slot receiver. He took 78% of his reps inside. So to say that won't transpire to the next level is asinine, especially when this past year, when he would have had the opportunity to play on the outside because of Chris Olave, who was a 1,000-yard receiver, because Garrett Wilson, who was a 1,000-yard receiver, all of that were no longer on the roster. You could have maybe seen what you have with that. I personally think that what you look at right now is a good wide receiver that will just come in and make an impact on your team. What are you missing? A good wide receiver that will come in and make an immediate impact on your team. So I think that that's where you got to go. That's where you.
And you have the extra picks, so there is a luxury. It's the same thing Jacksonville did with Travis Etienne. Like, it's you have the extra picks, do it. Wes wants to know what I think about Stetson Bennett. I want no part of Johnny Boyzell. I'm good on Johnny Boyzell. What do you think of Stetson Bennett?
I'll take him with Mr. Irrelevant, like literally Mr. Irrelevant pick, and I will gladly do that. But at the same time, I'm also going to be real. After the video that dropped of him coming out of Dallas, begging people to say, "Oh, you threw my career away. I'm not doing that. Like, I personally am not drafting you. I don't have you on my board. But if you want to go ahead and get your Brock Purdy 2.0, cool, go for it.
Yeah,
that's it. That's like it would literally be pick 259. That would be the only time I would draft him.
Here's a wild scenario I'm gonna throw at you, and I could easily see this happening. Anthony Richardson being there at 12. I think of all the wild possibilities that we're throwing out, I could see Anthony Richardson being passed on by the Texans twice.
Yeah, I could too. And I think honestly, what you're gonna see here. Okay, so here's my thing. If you are going to make the trade with Minnesota, this is where you want to make the trade. Because Minnesota is looking to move off Kirk Cousins. They didn't sign him to a long-term deal. They didn't sign him to a contract extension this offseason from what I've gathered by those around the Minnesota area, they do like the upside of an Anthony Richardson in this offense. You wouldn't have to play him right away. If you feel like that this is where you can go ahead and maybe target like a Quentin Johnston later on, maybe a Zay Flowers later on, I've come around and really started liking the film on Deonte Banks, the cornerback out of Maryland. If you feel like that's where you can go ahead and get those type of players at pick 23, then go ahead and do that, because this is where you get more value. Where I don't think that Houston allows themselves to pass on a quarterback. I think what they do is they allow them to move down the board to let someone else come get a quarterback. Just what they did at pick number 2. And I feel like that's the best plan if you are Houston.
What's going on with these Minnesota rumors all of a sudden? Like, there is like a hypothetical them trading up all the way to 2, which is, good God, that's a haul.
I mean, what is that? 3 first round picks, 3 second round picks,
like 3 and 2 or something like that. Yeah, it's a lot.
I mean, we're talking 8 picks at some point. Like we're talking at that level. That's what we're like. That's almost asinine. And it's malpractice for an organization right now that has 5 picks in this year's draft to trade all the way up from 23 to 2. So this is where you'd want to do it. I think Anthony Richardson right now is the wild card, because of you're starting to hear more and more Will Levis. You're hearing less and less of Anthony Richardson. I don't think that he falls out of the top 15, but I do think that if there is one quarterback right now that I would say, just because of the limited reps, because of the limited games that he's played, there is some question marks to his game. I don't personally see them. I think he is honestly probably a top 15 player in this year's draft. If you have that ability to go ahead and trade down and let someone else take that risk and you don't want him, then do so. I think that he's the quarterback that does fall in the top 10.
Yeah, and then I think if you're not going to take him at 2, at 12, I know it's a little bit different. I know there's like the Josh Rosen situation where you punt after a year and stuff, but I mean, really, what are you accomplishing? Like, what do you think? What's like the big? I know it's a big difference because 2 and 12, and I mean, if you just look at the Jimmy chart, like it would be couple of 1s, couple of 2s, and all, and it's the value is different, but we're talking about quarterback. Like, what do you? If you're drafting a quarterback at 12, you're hoping that he can start at some point.
I would say no later than mid-season, and if you sit him for the entire year, it's because of the veterans in a contract year. It's like what you saw with Trey Lance back in 2021. But at the same time, you added in Trey Lance because if you thought maybe Jimmy would get hurt, and then when Jimmy got hurt, he struggled. Lance struggled, and then he came back, and then Jimmy took him all the way to the NFC Championship game. So it's like that's where you are right now if you're trying to get a quarterback at 12.
And then you talk about, the Minnesota, like if you made a Minnesota trade, could there be a situation where you bring in Kirk Cousins, who Kyle Shanahan loved? Like, that's the reason Kyle Shanahan didn't draft a quarterback at 2, because they were going to wait on Kirk Cousins. Now, they ended up trading for Garoppolo, but they love Kirk Cousins and they loved him in this system, and he's been in this system for a while. Gerard Johnson was in Minnesota. Gerard knows, a thing or two about Cousins. Maybe a stopgap situation with Kirk Cousins. I mean, we're getting way ahead of ourselves now, and we're just going complete long shot. But if they don't take a quarterback, then what are we looking at? Like, what's if no quarterback? Let's say they don't get Hendon Hooker. Are we preparing ourselves for a situation where Davis Mills is the dude?
You're saying not a quarterback at all. Like, they go 7 rounds and they don't draft a quarterback.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Davis Mills, because Davis Mills gives you more upside, in my opinion, just because of the youthfulness.
What
and that's not saying much.
Trade or a Mac Jones trade or something like that, depending on what happens in the draft.
Would you call San Francisco and see what they want for a guy like Trey Lance? You call and see what a team like New England wants for Mac Jones. But at the same time, I don't think that either is going to be made available. I think of the 2, Lance is probably more available. And I do think that right now, Lance is kind of on the teetering fence, only because of you're waiting to hear what's the status of Brock Purdy going into the year, because you don't want to go ahead and say, oh, Brock Purdy's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. And then at the point of where you're wondering, okay, can Sam Darnold get enough wins for us to stay relevant for that time period? Or do we have at least a quarterback conversation to where if Trey comes in, Trey maybe goes ahead and gets us a couple wins. If he has some couple losses, well, then we go ahead and we go back to Brock. That's really the thing right now, is you're waiting to hear what is the prognosis of Brock Purdy going into the year. Mac Jones at this point, I feel like
they like Sam, man. I think they like Sam too.
No, they brought in Sam because there was that conversation of when Sam was on the chopping block for New York. They named San Francisco as a destination. So it makes sense to go ahead and go after Sam. But can Sam get you enough wins with a great defense, with great weaponry, and with a solid offensive line? Can he get you enough wins to where if Brock Purdy is out for a significant period of time, you feel comfortable with that? That's the main question.
Trey Lance?
No. You Trey's traded to Houston or Trey's traded elsewhere.
Trey. Okay.
So you're saying at this point, we're just riding it out with Sam Darnold. Sam has to get us X amount of wins on this way. So that's my thing. Now, again, I said when they added in D'Amico, when D'Amico started to go ahead and be at the forefront of the conversations, trade one of your threes. Just trade one of your threes and go ahead and bring over Trey Lance. And I feel like that's the right move. Now, the problem is that if you go into next season and you don't have Trey Lance on your roster, then you're starting Davis Mills. I don't think that you're getting Mac Jones. I think Mac is locked in for a full year. I don't think that they're going to have to pay
Like O'Brien would like him.
I think that no. And again, Bill O'Brien sat down with
taught him the offense at Alabama, right?
They sat there for literally 2 weeks learning the offense.
Taught him the offense.
So
wasn't even gonna play. Just taught him the offense.
Just literally he was going through pre-draft process, and he's like, "Oh, by the way, while I'm going through my pre-draft, give me some notes on the NFL. I'll teach you how to be Alabama's offense." Like that's how they correlated with each other. So they have a good relationship together. But Trey is the wild card. I think that if Bobby Slowick can see enough in Trey Lance to where there are positives. And by the way, here's the thing. Anybody out there that goes ahead and says, oh, the Kyle Shanahan offense, there's no such thing as the Kyle Shanahan offense, just like there's no such thing as Patriot South or Patriot North. It only works in one area. It works for Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan, and it only works in Foxborough. You take little tidbits from those offenses and you predicate it to your offense. If the positives of what Bobby Slowick wants to run from the offense that was implemented by Kyle Shanahan works with a quarterback like Trey Lance, you go ahead and you make that trade. And I think that right now, the good news is that if Trey pans out, you have a quarterback that's on a rookie deal for another 2 years after this season. And if he doesn't pan out, you're probably right back in the situation you were next year. You gave up a third-round pick. Okay, that's very fair when you have 2 third-round picks. And you probably are in line to go get Caleb Williams, Drake May, or whoever's the next big quarterback. And that's the thing. And the other thing I will say about quarterbacks in this year's draft when it comes to like a Hendon Hooker, I'm not going to bring it up because I get it. There's people out there that hate him. But you got to remember that the COVID-19 waiver is now going to make all these other quarterbacks older. So Quinn Ewers may be 21. Quinn Ewers may end up being a really good prospect in about a year. I'm not going to go into that too much. But you also may really like what you saw from Devin Leary. You may really like what you saw from Bo Nix. And they're just going to be 24 years old. And it's just because of the COVID-19 waiver gave them an extra year of work. So that's just it.
The difference, though, like you were talking about, the Patriot way and the Shanahan thing. The Shanahan thing has multiple examples of working, though. Like there's multiple examples. The Patriot way is kind of a little bit. I don't even know. Like is there another example of it really working?
No, it never has.
The Shanahan, there's different ways to run it.
But what I'm saying is you take pieces from the Shanahan coaching tree. I mean, the Shanahan offense, and you work that into your system. You don't take it completely. You take it.
And I don't think they would do that.
But that's what I'm saying. You take parts of it and you add it to what you want to implement, where everyone tries to go ahead and do the exact same thing in New England, and it's never worked anywhere. It didn't work when it was in Detroit. It didn't work in Houston. It hasn't worked anywhere. It only works in Foxborough. So that's my argument for it.
Ricky says his brain hurts to think about the draft at this point. I'm right there with you.
Join the club.
It's a lot. I mean, it is a hell of a lot going on right now. So you're not alone in that at all, even a little bit. Cole Thompson here. So Will Anderson is the guy that you think, if you had to predict what the Texans are going to do it to, you think Will Anderson's the guy?
I think Will Anderson is the pick. I think if you're not moving down to, say, pick number 7, and you're hoping that a Tyree Wilson falls that far, which, again, Tyree Wilson, I think, offers great value immediately in the NFL as a run defender. And you do need to get better at the run defense. You ranked dead last year defending the run. You ranked dead last in missed tackles. You had the most yards after contact last year. You got to get that guy. But if you're staying at pick number 2, I think Will Anderson is the more complete prospect. I don't think that he is Nick Bosa level. I don't think that he is probably even Joey Bosa level, but I do think that he has the upside of being a top 10 pass rusher when it's all said and done.
All right, man. Appreciate you for hopping in. It's going to be fun. We got 3 sleeps till we actually get some clarity, maybe a little bit of rest from this whole process. Appreciate you for coming through. Let the people know when the mock draft is dropping and where they can follow your work.
You can go ahead and check out my full first round mock draft of all 32 teams or however many are actually drafting. You can go ahead and get that tomorrow. You can also go ahead and check out my top 150 prospects. That's dropping tomorrow afternoon or early Wednesday morning. If you want to go ahead and check out my full Texans 7-round mock draft, that's available on TexansWire.com. It's also pinned at the very top of my Twitter account. And you can always give me a follow on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson. You can always go ahead and also listen to the Just Saying It show with Cole Thompson on the Sports Map Radio Network every single day on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Audio Boom. And for those of you that are awake at the God-given hours of when I'm actually on air, you can listen from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. every single day, Monday through Friday.
Good Lord. That's a lot of stuff. Cole, appreciate you, man.
Anytime, my man.
It's my guy, Cole Thompson, right there here in the locker room. Appreciate everyone for coming through. Subscribe, like. If you're tired of the draft talk, I understand. I can't get enough of it. It is the season of speculation. It is the season of the unknown. It is the season of hypotheticals. Embrace it. Take it in. No matter what happens, remember, though, we are all in this together. 3 more sleeps till the mother effing draft.
It's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, Locker Room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the pulse of the city too. Landlocked. Got the game in the headlock. Localize every time. Can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top 2 and we not 2. Plugged in daily digital on YouTube.